You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
Hello, my name is Fergal O'Keeffe and you're very welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to say that we have another true adventurer on the podcast this week. Tomas Mac from Kerry has spent the last number of years cycling around the world. He's been throughout Australia, Asia and Africa from the top to the bottom. And more recently he's cycled from India to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran to the UAE, all on his bike. So let's hear now from what I would call a true adventurer, Tomas. Tomas, you're very welcome to the podcast. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks a million for having me on, Fergal. Great to chat to you.
Are you in your family pub in Ballyferter? That's what it looks like there with the sun shining in the background.
Yeah. So I'm back home again now for the summer, and I'll stick around until the winter again, and I'll head off traveling.
Was that the pub Cillian Murphy did an interview for 60 Minutes in America? Was he in that pub?
Yeah, he was.
Wow.
He's got a house over in Ventry. He's been in a couple of times, I guess. And yeah, they did the. I wasn't here for it, unfortunately. Dad was, so Dad had his couple of seconds of fame on
Wow.
American
I bet,
television. So
I bet that
yeah,
made you homesick, did it?
a bit. Yeah, it was a great interview though. You know, Killian, he's
Mm.
lovely. So yeah, it was great. And it was great to have the pub here as well in it. So it was nice that he
Yeah.
chose here for the interview.
And it's Ballyferter in the Dingle Peninsula, isn't that where the pub is?
Yeah, it's about if you just leave Dingle, it's about ten minutes out the road,
What's the
8 miles.
What's the name of the pub?
Um Sayers Pub or
Ah,
Tig and Tersig,
I get you.
Oscar.
I get you. So you are just back, really, aren't you, from your epic travels?
Yeah, just back a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, bad back to the beautiful weather. But yeah, so this one was probably my shortest trip in a while now. It was just under 4 months, from India to Dubai through Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran. So it was fairly action packed for the few months.
Yeah. So you're
And
basically cycling around the world in segments. You've been kind of doing it since 2016, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's worked out like that, that it's been on and off, and there's been times, of course, where I've just thought about finishing off in one go, but I think it's great that it's lasted so long as well, because the
Mm.
world is ever changing. So like the world in 2024 it's a bit different to the world that was there in 2016. So it's been nice that it's kind of just prolonged so long, and
I
I
know.
don't know, is there any end date to it? I'll go back again next winter and then I'll do the next segment of the trip, and who knows after that.
And when you started, the first plan when you cycled across, was it the west coast to the east coast of America?
Yeah, so that was October, November, December 2016. I had just graduated from NUIG up in Galway, and I had planned to go on to do my teacher's masters because I'd always planned to go teaching. And then I just decided to take a year out, and a friend of mine who I was working with had put the idea into my head of going off on a cycle tour, and chose America just because I'd never been there, and it just seemed like a dare I say, an easy country to begin with. And so I found a nice kind of route down south. It was going to be, 20, 25 degrees because you're avoiding the snow up in the north as well. Spent 7 weeks cycling across America. At that stage, I was raising funds for the Donald Walsh Live Life Foundation as well, based out of Blennerville there in Tralee. And yeah, that was the first trip in 2016. So 7 weeks across the States, had a wonderful time. And I kind of realized that this lifestyle could suit me because you're off on your own, and then I was meeting so many people, which I never thought would happen because I always just thought, like, why would anyone be interested in some young lad cycling on a bicycle across the country? But yeah, no, turned out the opposite to that. So people were very helpful and very supportive of me as I crossed the States. And then there was a lull then for a couple of years in 2018. Then I went and cycled Africa top to bottom, and I guess that was the first big trip.
Were you big into cycling when you were younger? Like before you did that America one, had you done much
Um,
cycling?
I had started a few years before that. So, I mean, as a kid, like any kid, you're biking around with your friends, and you're messing around the place and stuff, and going down to the beach and all that kind of crack. And then I guess throughout my teenage years, then I was playing Gaelic football and a bit of soccer. So I didn't start again until I was about 17, going on 18. Then I started cycling. I took one of Dad's bikes and I started cycling back to football training. And then I don't know, we were watching the TG Car then one day, and the Tour de France was on TG Car, and I said, geez, I'd love to buy one of those road bikes because they looked fast and it looked fun. So I went into Tralee and bought a road bike, and that was that then. That was, I think I was 18 almost at that stage. And yeah, I just love the freedom it gave me because, it got me out to even explore my own area, like places I hadn't been in years, like going cycling around Slay Head and stuff, it really opened up my eyes to how beautiful the West Kerry Peninsula is, and the rest of Ireland as well. Because I ended up doing a bit of, like, I was cycling up in Galway up in college, and I was up in Mayo, and I was heading out towards Connemara on my days off college and on the weekends and stuff like that, and going down to Clare and stuff. So it was a great way to get out and explore.
It's funny actually that one of the few cycles I've ever done is that cycle, from Dingle out around Slay Head and back again many
Yeah,
years
it's
ago.
beautiful,
Yeah. And you kind of
beautiful
see that you
cycle.
see the countryside. I'm sure this is what you've seen all over the world. You see it in a completely different way when you're on a bike, don't you?
Oh, you do. I guess you're not going that fast, and even like when I'm on my tour bike now, it's pretty heavy loaded with gear and stuff. So, I mean, if you're doing 20k an hour, it's a good day. So, I mean, I tell people jump in a car and drive at 20 kilometers an hour, and that's what I cycle at. Roll down the windows, and you'll hear everything, you'll see everything, you'll smell everything. So, you get all those experiences, and you get to go down the back road. Like my bike's a gravel bike when I travel, so it also means I can go off road as well. So you're not just on the busy highways all the time or on the busy main roads. I get to take off down. I can pretty much cycle on everything that isn't mountain bike trails, because they get a bit too steep and stuff, but everything else is fine. Like gravel tracks in Iran recently. I was out in the desert. I was on sandy tracks for a while as well, and sometimes you just have to get off and walk and push as well. So it's all part and parcel of the traveling.
I know you were talking there about your first big trip after America, I suppose, was going down Africa from Cairo down to Cape Town, and I read some stuff about that, and I thought it was gas because you were talking about like the police in Egypt, understandably, were they don't want any tourists getting killed, so
Yeah.
they were following you in a car, was it? So it wasn't very peaceful because you say we were going 20 miles an hour, they're barely moving behind you.
Yeah, yeah, God. I guess I'll crack with the police in Egypt. So yeah, and sometimes there'll be two lots of them, and they're all armed with AK-47s. And now, yeah, again, yeah, they do it out of safety because, God forbid anything happens to tourists in Egypt and the whole world knows about it. So they're very concerned that if anything were to happen to me, because usually when people go to Egypt, Fergal, it's via tour companies, so everything's organized for them. So their transportation, their accommodation, their tours throughout the day, everything's organized. And in Egypt, you can't travel between dusk and dawn as a foreigner, as a tourist, because just again, just safety reasons. So of course, when I rolled into the first checkpoint with my bicycle with no tour guide, no tour company behind me, and no one following me, or just on my own, they of course said, "Oh, look, like you can't travel like this in Egypt. It's not allowed. So we have to follow you." So, and they'd always try to get me into the car because the next checkpoint's only 5 or 10 kilometers down the road. So there's like, "Oh, yeah, it's too dangerous to cycle. Like, just jump in the car and we'll take you down." And but it's like, oh no, like I feel safe. Like you're all with AK-47s. I'm sure I'll be okay. No one's going to try anything with me when I have four, five, six heavily armed police around me and stuff. And so you just have a bit of crack with them because look, I didn't want an escort. I didn't feel in danger. And they, of course, didn't want to be following somebody on a bicycle who's traveling at 20, 25 Ks an hour. So I'd always try cycle faster. And that's how I got on better with some of the sergeants, we'll say, that were trying to get me into the back of the car because I'd say, oh no, like I cycle fast, it's okay, like just you can stay behind me, I'll be fast, I'll cycle fast and stuff. And you just have a bit of crack with them and try get on with them. And once you build up a decent relationship with them, then they'll tell the next crew that, oh, I know this Irish guy, he's sound, he's nice, just leave him off cycling, he's fast, and wave him off to the next crowd. So yeah.
You saying like you love the Sudanese people, that you'd love to go back there, that they're very warm, is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess Sudan was probably the first country that I visited or cycled through that everything I had heard beforehand was mostly negative comments. And then, cycling through the country and experiencing the people themselves, um, it was completely different to what I had thought it would be. The Sudanese went above and beyond to make me feel welcome, to accommodate me. That they'd almost take the skin off their back if they had to, if they knew it would help you in any sort of in a way. And it was the same, throughout the rest of Africa and other countries like Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan as well. These countries that we get told negative things about all the time. They're usually the countries where the people are the most hospitable. And they find it hard themselves to understand why, Western people look down on them so much. But, they also know that, their governments may not always be the nicest or the finest or the best or whatever, So that's why I think a lot of people um don't say positive things about those countries all the time.
But also, like um, a tourist gets shot in America, it doesn't make like headline news. Whereas
No, but if
a
it happened
tourist
in
gets shot
Sudan, it'll be all.
yeah, or anywhere in Africa,
Yeah,
a-
yeah, yeah.
and
I
it's
was
like,
in I
don't
was
go to
in
Africa, the whole
yeah,
continent.
I was in Nairobi. That was January 2019, and the first terrorist attack in Nairobi happened in 6 years. So the previous one had been 2013. So yeah, January 2019, a group attacked a hotel, and it was like a five-star hotel. So it's like visited by, wealthy Kenyans or wealthy Africans and wealthy tourists as well. And it took about a day for the police to quell the attack. But being on Twitter that night and reading reports from Western media the following day, it was as if the world had ended. And then being in Nairobi, physically being there at the time, it was as if nothing had happened because they don't give it the time of day. It's just it happened. We dealt with it, and let's move on. We'll investigate it, and but there was no I guess no big scene made out of it, because you don't want to give them any more attention than what they're already looking for. Whereas the Western media had gone on about it for days and days, and I was reading headlines like, "Is Africa safe to visit anymore? Is Kenya safe to visit?" Like, and then you saw how the locals dealt with it, and it was as if nothing happened because you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to give them any more attention because that's what they're craving for. They just want to be
Yeah.
in the media for days and their name to be spread out there, their name to be mentioned, and then that'll in their view garner them more support.
How did you feel? Did you feel, as in, from a safety point of view, through each country, how did you feel safe all the time, or were you always nervous?
Yeah,
Or
the only dangers really, to be honest, were traffic, which is the
same in
biggest danger
Ireland?
in any country I've cycled through, and animals. Animals was the other danger. So Africa, obviously there's tons of wildlife out there, and sometimes the roads go through the national parks, and this happened a few times, but there was twice it happened that there was close calls with lions in once in Tanzania and once in Botswana when I was camping. And then also going through Botswana, there's a road called Elephant Highway. It's 300 kilometers from near the border down to a town called I think Nata, Nata, or Maun, Maun, one or the other. But the road goes on for about 300 kilometers, and it's just elephants, wildlife. It goes through Chobe National Park, and
Walking
yeah,
across the road as you're cycling and walking
yeah,
along.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, other places I'd see giraffes and zebras pretty much every day, and wildebeest and all the other animals and stuff. But in Botswana was elephants you were seeing every day, and you are you can't get too close to them, especially the baby elephant when it's with its mother, because the mother just goes absolutely berserk. And that happened once, but thankfully there was a stretch of water between me and the mother because it beckoned the baby elephant to go back into the bush, and the mother elephant just kept going berserk until I left the scene. But it was incredible to witness because I love elephants are just incredible when you see them up close. But if you get within, I think 100, 200 meters, then they get a bit angry and they can move fast. They can run up to 30, 35 k's an hour. You wouldn't think with how big and heavy they are, but
Mm.
yeah, they're pretty nippy on the feet. When I first saw the wildlife in Kenya, so like I guess Egypt, Sudan is kind of it's a because it's the Arabic world. It's a bit of a continuation of the Middle East, and then you get to Ethiopia, and then you kind of start to transition from we'll say Arabic Africa into the more wildlife of Africa, where they say the real Africa begins. So you're in Ethiopia and everything starts getting a bit greener, and you're back in the high mountains again, and then you get to Kenya, and that's when the wildlife really begins. And I remember when I first saw zebras and giraffes on the side of the road, and you're just pedaling along, and you're just like, God, you see sheep and cattle back in Ireland, and here I'm looking at zebras and giraffes, and you start pinching yourself, and you're just like, geez, am I really living in the real life here, or am I just dreaming? But like in Botswana as well, for example, like just going on about how people just learn to live with the animals. Like Botswana, I think it's the same size as France, but with only 2 million people. So, people have this, and it's just a gigantic national park. But going through Chobe National Park, there was villages and towns, like they're spread out, but they're there. And some of the smaller villages that are really within the national park itself, they've just got fenced up around the villages. But you can see the fence has been kind of broken down from elephants charging at it as well.
Yes.
People haven't moved out; they've still lived there and the whole lot. But I think they just rebuild the fence then again.
So what countries did you go through then? How many countries down South Africa? What ones did you go through?
So started in Egypt and then crossed into Sudan, Ethiopia, but then there was ethnic conflict in Ethiopia, so I ended up having to fly from Ethiopia to Uganda. So I picked up from Uganda, and then Uganda into Kenya, Kenya to Tanzania to Malawi, Zambia, Botswana, and then across to Namibia and then down to South Africa.
And are the countries different from each other? I know, like you described it perfectly actually there. I never thought about that. You're right, the Middle East, then going into the traditional view, but are they quite different, each country? Do they have their own personality and the people as well?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But the kindness is seen everywhere. But yeah, like Kenyan people, incredible people. Sorry, the dog's barking
Yeah,
puppies.
that's okay. Don't worry.
Incredible people, and but God, you put them behind the wheel of a car. The driving in Kenya it's crazy. Tanzanians, Malawi, known as the warm heart of Africa. Um, and I think probably one of the poorest countries in the world. But again, that was probably although people had been very generous throughout the rest of Africa up until that stage, but I think the Malawians were just incredibly generous, but they don't have much. But it was my first, and Sudan as well, of course. But yeah, Sudan and Malawi were probably my first real experiences of being in the more poorer countries of the world, but also experiencing the incredible generosity of the people that whatever they have, they're willing to share. They want to help you. They want to be part of your journey. They want you to feel welcome. They want you to feel safe. They want you to have a full belly, to be watered, to give you a place to sleep for the night as well. Um, so it was just incredible generosity throughout all of Africa. Bobby. Um,
Do you speak Irish to your dog?
Yeah, a bit of a mix. A bit of a mix. Bobby, be cute.
You did Africa, and then did you go through Southeast Asia as well?
Yeah, so Africa finished in 2019. Then I flew to New Zealand in January 2020. And then, of course, COVID happened. So I ended up spending over 2 years in New Zealand, but finished my cycling there, did a bit of cycling and work in Australia. And then I did Southeast Asia. That was kind of split over two trips. So in August and September 2022, I cycled Vietnam top to bottom. And then I came home for 4 weeks, then went back out to continue the cycling. So then I'd cycled Australia, did a bit of Australia, and then started Southeast Asia in December 2022. So I started in East Timor. I flew from Australia to East Timor to Dili, which is a country, to be honest, I didn't really hear of before I got there. Just I read a couple of travel blogs. An Irish guy had cycled there before, back in 2016 or 17. So started Southeast Asia, yeah, December 2022, and then finished in May 2023. So I spent 6 months cycling through. On top of the other 2 months, I'd spent cycling Vietnam as well. So 8 months altogether in Southeast Asia.
What was East Timor like?
Incredible. it's a bit like going back in time because tourism hasn't taken over at all there. It's pretty difficult to get to. You can only fly in from Bali, Singapore, and Darwin in Australia. So it's not the easiest country to travel to. And they've just got independence since 2002. They were colonized by the Portuguese up until 1975. And then they got independence from Portugal, and then 9 days later, they were invaded by Indonesia. So they Indonesians stayed then until I think 1999 until the UN eventually sent in a peacekeeping force, which should have been done
Mm.
years and years and years before that in the first place. But they eventually went in anyways, and then they stayed for a few years and they got independence in 2002. So it's a relatively young country. Still trying to find its feet, you know. Australia, I guess, still kind of take advantage of East Timor. But the people, incredible there, beautiful people, incredibly friendly. You know, you're traveling through the small towns and the villages, and they all kind of still live in communal villages. So it's all like kind of huts. Now, some of them have some like brick houses and stuff, but some of them are still huts and stuff. And you could have got 50 people all living on top of each other, all the houses and huts all on top of each other. They're not in Southeast Asia, you know, as I guess Western travelers, we always say like personal space. It doesn't exist out there. It's not like here where, you know, you jump on a bus and you always look for the empty seats and not to have to sit beside someone. Whereas out there, there's no such thing as personal space at all. And then it's an incredibly beautiful country. You've got incredible coastline all around East Timor. It's an island. One half is East Timor and the other half is Indonesia. Beautiful beaches, pristine, clean. There's no tourist infrastructure. You don't see the five-star hotels. You don't see the resorts littering the shorelines. Then you go into the interior of the country and you've incredibly beautiful mountains all going up to, I think the highest one is 4 or 5 thousand meters. And yeah, coffee plantations, beautiful coastline. And then, like I said, the old villages, the old towns, and it's like going 100 years back in time, just incredibly basic living, but yeah, no, beautiful, beautiful. Hopefully we'll get back again someday.
Yeah. And your last leg, you know, in a way, you could have been the one. I'm sure the one that your family were most nervous about. So where have you just what countries did you just do?
Bit of India, and then I went into Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and finished up in Dubai. So yeah, a couple of hairy sounding countries there.
Yeah. And so
But
when you
thankfully
went,
went out without a hitch.
but did you when you started that trip, you started in India. Did you not know exactly what countries you were going to go through?
I knew I'd do a bit of India, Pakistan, and Iran, but then when I was in Pakistan, I found out I could go through Afghanistan.
Into Iran.
Yeah, into Iran. So once I knew I could go through Afghanistan, I couldn't get it out of my head. I was like, I have to go because it's the safest time to visit Afghanistan with 50 years since the 70s. So I knew, and you know, you just don't know how peaceful it's going to remain there. So I was just like, well, while it's peaceful now and while it's safe to travel through, I was just like, I want to get there because who knows when the next opportunity will come across again to get to Afghanistan.
It's funny you're saying peaceful because maybe the perception with people is
Yeah.
that it's not, but actually you're right. I suppose there's probably been
As
civil
it
war for
from a
50
traveler's
years.
perspective, I
Mm,
should probably make that clear. From a traveler's perspective,
yeah.
it's okay to visit. Now, obviously, you know, there's women don't really have much of a role in society there, and the Hazara people are still continue to be persecuted against and stuff. So, but I suppose, yeah, when I say peaceful, there's no war with America anymore. You know, the American soldiers are gone, NATO are gone, the bombings have stopped. The Taliban are solely in charge now, but they're also fighting another group called IS Khorasan. So they're pretty much a branch of ISIS. So these guys are saying that the Taliban are gone too soft and that they've linked up too closely with the West, which
Wow.
obviously is incredibly hard to believe, seeing as nobody from the West recognizes the Taliban as government and the Taliban don't deal or interact with Western countries anymore. So yeah, you know, people say that, you know, and that they're not, you know, they're no angels, the Taliban, but then you have this other crowd that are probably more extreme than them. So I guess thankfully they're not in power as bad
Oh,
as the Taliban are.
and was that hard to get in there then? To get a visa?
No, no, it was probably, God, it was probably probably the easiest visa I've ever had to get. I went into the Afghan consulate in Peshawar, which is a city maybe 60, 70K from the border, and I was in and out in 15 minutes. I had the visa, handed my passport over, $100, and 15 minutes later, the guy came out with the visa and said, "Good luck."
So what's it like there?
Exactly what a war-torn country would look like, to be honest. God, yeah, it's again like incredibly friendly local people, very helpful. Beautiful country. But in terms of like modern infrastructure, anything like that, it doesn't really exist there. You know, you're cycling out in the countryside through the desert or whatever, and you're passing mud villages full of mud houses that people still live in. It's like, what they lived in 500, 1,000 years ago. So things haven't really advanced. It's kind of like it's just stuck in time, parts of the country. And even Kabul, it doesn't seem like a modern city or anything like that. There's been plenty of conflict there. So now they're obviously in the process of rebuilding as well. Like there's lots of work to do and lots of work going on at the moment. Like the road I traveled cross country from Kabul, the road to Kabul was in good condition. But then the road from Kabul to Kandahar was in exceptionally bad condition. Chunks of it. Some of it they've repaved and stuff, but because of all the bombings and the attacks and stuff, the roads it's just been dug up, there's potholes the size of cars. It's incredibly bumpy and a bit dangerous too because, the like you wouldn't want to travel it at nighttime or anything like that, especially you wouldn't want to drive it anyways. So and then the buses travel at incredibly fast speeds and stuff as well. But before, like during the war, there was bandits operating on those roads. So like even for Afghan people, they couldn't even travel like the locals. It wasn't safe for them to travel. And now they say things like, oh, they're happy at the moment because it's safe for them now. So like that they had their 50, they had the war with the Soviets and they had the civil war amongst themselves and the Taliban took power and then 2001, obviously the Americans invaded. So all they've known for the last 50 years is conflict and things are far from perfect there, but they're happier with the current situation because it's safe for them to travel around the country again. It's safe for them to go to the few that have work. It's safe for them to go to work and stuff that they can travel from city to city without the fear of that they're going to get shot or robbed again, or that with the fear that bombs are going to go off on the side of the road or anything like that. But they do have a long road to recovery, a very very long road to recovery. But they're hopeful. They're as long as peace holds, they're hopeful that in the next couple of decades, hopefully things will improve there.
How are they with you, like the general public?
Very curious.
See,
Very, yeah, very, very curious because all they've known is soldiers for the last, like I said, 40, 50
yeah.
years. So, and the soldiers would never really have had much interaction with them, apart from, interrogating them, quizzing them about Taliban activity and stuff. So now that, tourists are coming back to the country, firstly, that they're delighted to see people return, and I suppose secondly, it just provides a bit of a distraction for them as well. They're just curious because a lot of them obviously want to leave the country, and they say things like, "Oh, like there's nothing here, why are you coming to visit? There's no, our economy is in a bad state, the roads are in a bad state. It's not the easiest country to travel around. Like I wouldn't recommend it for like a beginner travel. I think you do need to have your wits about you, and you do need to have a decent amount of experience to get around the place. But yeah, no, just curious, just asking where I'm from, what I'm doing there. And of course once I see the bicycle, they're just gobsmacked as to why I'd want to travel on a bicycle. But just like nice, lovely interactions with them, just the innocence of it all. It was like that in Africa too, especially in the countryside, away from the touristy areas. People would always just ask like, why bicycle? Why are you traveling like this? Do you not have money for a car or a motorbike or something? And but no, yeah, the interactions were great, but there are very very few people speak English there. So, where I would love to have spoken more to people and heard more of their stories. A lot of the time, just the language barrier and the internet connection is extremely bad there. So apart from the towns and the cities, there isn't any internet connection outside of those places. So once you're in the countryside, it's touch and go if it works or not. So, in the towns, at least I could use the translation apps to speak to them. but out in the countryside, it wasn't great. But sometimes, on a few occasions, somebody would have like a decent amount of English, or there might be like the local school teacher who'd get called, who'd be able to come over and translate. And the Taliban did that because every day, you'd interact with the Taliban because of the checkpoints. So like you just see them throughout the whole day, and then like evening time wherever I stayed, because outside of the cities, there's no accommodation, so you can stay. I stayed with locals a lot. I stayed at the roadside gas stations, cafes, restaurants. So there's always a place on the floor to sleep. They'd have to call the Taliban to let them know that the foreigner was staying. Just I suppose that's what the Taliban that's what they said the rules were, but also I guess got in case anything happened as well. So the Taliban would turn up. So there's always a few of them who turn up and they just check in and make sure everything was okay and ask if I felt safe and if I was okay sleeping where I was and stuff like that. And if there was too many people. So because everyone was so curious, at any given time, if I stopped in a town, you could have 20, 30 people standing around you, and all of a sudden it could be 50, 60, up to 100 people, depending, how populated the town was. Because again, they just wanted to see the foreigner and the fact that, I could speak to them and I wasn't there to hurt them. I wasn't there to terrorize them or anything like that. People were just curious, so they just stand around you and stuff. So at these roadside restaurants and stuff, like if there was too many people there, the Taliban would just tell them to leave and to leave me alone and leave me get some sleep and stuff like that. So, but there was never any hassle. Like I never felt threatened. I never felt that, my life was in danger. And when I was at the roadside gas stations and restaurants and stuff, there was always other people sleeping there because like the gas stations, the staff would sleep in just a common room and we'd all just sleep on the floor. There'd be blankets and pillows and stuff. And you'd sit down, you'd eat with them, you'd drink tea with them, you'd chat till all hours with them, if you could, and yeah, just incredible, just really heartwarming interactions. For some travelers, it's going to come down to, I guess, a moral question of is it right to visit or is it not right to visit Afghanistan or any of these countries? Um, so, that's down to an individual and their own personal opinions, I guess. But I just want to see the world for how it is. I love exploring and I don't want to not visit Afghanistan because of who's in charge or what happened there in the past and stuff. And some people might not agree with that about me, but I don't think I guess it's not I don't think it's right to collectively punish the whole country, especially now having been there and seen how incredibly friendly the local people are. And how they went so far out of their way to accommodate me, and there's never any issues. If I was looking for something, like you get to these small villages, and you know there might not be any restaurants there. So if I was looking for food, I just tell someone I was hungry and where could I go. Somebody would always walk with you and they'd bring you to whatever local place there was to get food. They'd make sure I was given food. They'd make sure I was looked after and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just those interactions. And then if I was never stuck for a place to sleep. Like I'd always cycle till sunset because I was 100% confident every evening that I'd have a place to sleep. And there was always a spot on the floor someplace and stuff like that. So yeah.
And you were careful there, weren't you, about what you took photos of and
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Careful with what you say, careful taking photographs. Like in posting about Afghanistan online, a few people will be like, oh, like where are the women? And they're visible. You can I saw women most days, but so some like Afghanistan and Yemen would be the two most conservative Muslim countries in the world. So, the rules would be stricter there. Whereas like for example in Iran, you could speak to women, you could take photographs with them, I could eat with them again, I could sit in the same room as them. But in Afghanistan, you can't. I only spoke to one woman throughout my few weeks cycling across Afghanistan, which of course, like, you want to be able to interact with everybody. But I didn't, because you just didn't want to get anyone into trouble. Like even local people taking me in and stuff, they also had, and that's why the Taliban were called every evening where I was, because if the Taliban had found out that, a foreigner had stayed in someone's house and they weren't notified, it was the same in Egypt, it was the same in Pakistan, it happens in India, You know, Iran, locals aren't meant to take people in, but they do. Now they don't notify the police or anything like that. But a lot more tourists visit Iran than these other countries. Um, but you do have to tread extremely carefully there as well, because if you say anything out of tune, or you're just going to land yourself and potentially other people into trouble as well. So like that's why I'd never take photographs of women in Afghanistan. I'd never just walk up to them in the street and say hello. Or as much as I wanted like to speak to them, I didn't, because I just didn't want to get anyone into trouble. But then at towards the end of my time there, I was in Herat, and Herat's an incredibly historic city. Like Alexander the Great had visited, God knows how many centuries ago. It was on the Silk Road, so it was really, really famous, beautiful city. But as I was walking the street one day, a woman came up to me on the street and spoke perfect English, started chatting to me. Um, so of course I was chatting away to her for a few minutes, which was great because she was the first woman I'd spoken to since Pakistan. And after a few minutes, I was like, "Oh, like, are you going to get into trouble for talking to me?" Because as you were walking, you could just see people looking, I suppose wondering like, what's going on. And she said, "No, no, no, it's okay." So we went to the Herat Cathedral, which was built by Alexander the Great centuries ago. And as I was paying for the ticket, it was Taliban security, and she was speaking to them. And at that stage, now obviously I was quite worried. I was like, "Oh, like what's going to happen here?" And she had just told them that she was my translator, that I didn't speak Persian or Pashtun, the two main languages in Afghanistan. And yeah, we walked around the city drill taking photographs without any issue and stuff like that. And so and that was just that was probably my nicest experience, because I had gone through all of Afghan without speaking to a woman, even when I was staying at local people's houses. So when you go into the local's house, there's a social room for men and then a room for women. So I'd always get taken into the men's social room. So there's again just blankets on the floor, cushions, sometimes a television, sometimes not, and you're just in there chatting away and stuff. But even when I was staying over that night, I could always meet the kids. That was always fine. You could meet the girls and the boys. But the wife never met, never even saw in the house, just never introduced. But again, that's how conservative Afghanistan is. But then as soon as I crossed into Iran, the first night I stayed in Iran, I was invited to a local's home and met the wife, met the sisters, sat down, ate with them, took photographs with them. And I was even telling them, I was just like, this is the first time I've sat down with women since being in Pakistan. And I was telling them, like how conservative Afghanistan is, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like of course it's strict in Iran too, but not as strict as Afghanistan."
Only isn't it all relative? All of a sudden, you're in
Yeah,
Iran, you probably felt it really open and free, comparatively
yeah, yeah,
speaking.
yeah, yeah, but not for the local women there, but more open and free than Afghanistan at least.
Like, what is your impressions of Iran?
Iran, I heard so much about before I'd even got there. So anyone traveling by bicycle from Europe to Asia or vice versa, or even anyone traveling over land, whether it be motorbike or jeep or car, you have to go through Iran to get to Central Asia, or to get to the stands to start the famous Pamir Highway. Iranians are very, very used to travelers passing through, and just incredibly hospitable. And this is well known within the traveling circle, how helpful, incredibly hospitable Iranians are, how much they care for you, how much they want to help you. So like every day in Iran, people would pull over. If I was in a town or if I was eating someplace, people come over chatting. And a number of times people would refuse payment. Now, the rule of thumb is for anyone going to Iran, when they refuse your money, you offer three times. And if on like usually the second time they'll accept your money. So like there's a thing in Iran that they have to offer to you, they have to refuse your money. but they do it just because they have to do it. It's not like I wouldn't call it like being fake or anything like that. It is genuine, but like on the second go, they'll take your money or they won't take your money. But if they don't take your money, then they don't want to take your money. They really just want to be generous towards you, and then they'll invite you to their homes. They just love interacting with people because I guess with the sanctions on the Iranian government and the financial sanctions, the money it's pretty worthless there. It's difficult for Iranians to travel abroad, so their way to learn about the rest of the world and to interact with foreigners is to interact with them while they're in Iran. And thankfully, foreigners can travel through Iran without you've no escorts needed or anything like that. Now, again, you do have to be careful. You have to be careful what you take photographs of. You have to be careful where you go. Like you don't go near any military. But it's the same in most countries. You're not going to go up to the Currow and start taking
True.
pictures of the army base, the barracks up there, or anything like that. But in Iran, you do have to take extra careful because foreigners have been jailed, continue to be jailed there as well. And the Iranian government will use foreigners as political pawns, to get other Iranians out of jail elsewhere in the world. But no, and the people, they'll openly speak about the situation in Iran, and they say, oh look, we know, Western countries have a poor opinion of Iran, but please just know that that's just the government. It's not the local people. We're not. A lot of them don't want the government in charge. They're not happy with the government. There was big protests last year when that horrible case of the young girl, I think in northwest Iran, who was killed by the morality, the religious police for not wearing a hijab. So there has been massive protests. So people just they're not happy there. But they just want it to be let known that they're very friendly people. They want people to come to Iran. They want people to feel welcome in Iran. They want people to feel safe in Iran. And any grievances anyone has, it should be with the government and not the local people, which I think is fair enough.
And as a country, is it very beautiful?
Very beautiful. It's a big country, a lot of miles to cover there, but very diverse. So very mountainous. So I think 1/6 of Iran is over 2,000 meters. You have beautiful national parks, beautiful coastline, and then like the interior is mostly desert. But again, quite hilly. Like you could be up at 2,500 meters. Some roads will go up to 3,500, 4,000 meters. The weather is the climate is fairly split there because up in the north it gets very cold. Like up around Tehran, it was snowing. You can go skiing. And then down south, like Bandar Abbas, as you get closer to the Gulf, it gets a lot warmer down there. So they don't get that cold weather. But in the middle, then, around the very beautiful historic cities of Isfahan, Yazd, Shiraz, it gets quite chilly there. But just, I mean, the Persian history, the culture, it's incredible. It's known as the cradle of civilization. So it's a very beautiful country, and I hopefully might get back there again next winter to explore more because I didn't, being on a bicycle, you're traveling quite slow, so you don't get to see everything you want to see. And even towards the latter end of Iran, I ran out of time to cycle south to Bandar Abbas, so I officially finished my cycle route in Tehran, and then I did a mix of bus and cycling because I didn't want to miss, like I said, the cities of Isfahan, Yazd, and Shiraz because they're too beautiful not to get to. And I was just like, oh, well, if I don't get back next year, then, I'll have missed my opportunity to get there. So,
It was so beautiful. Like, what's the architecture like?
so would say yes now would be a full of, so they've really preserved the old city, the mud walls, the mud streets, and the mud houses. You're walk. Yes was my favorite because you're walking through the old city and just extremely narrow streets. Like even the hotels, the hostels, they've all preserved the mud walls. So it's just like you're walking 500 years back in time.
Yeah.
Incredibly preserved, incredibly beautiful, the architecture. You have all the old mosques dating back, God knows how many centuries, like 15th, 16th century. Then you had where the royals used to live, the houses, the mansions, you could say. Oh, again, beautifully preserved, all open for tourists now. Then you have the old walled cities, the squares. Iranians are always on picnics there. People just walking around, relaxing. Then you've like all the carpet shops, the art shops, just you get lost walking down the alleyways. And yeah, just beautiful, beautiful architecture.
I'd recommend people to check out what's your Twitter handle?
Tomas World Cycle,
Exactly.
Tomas World Cycle. So there's lots of pictures up there and more
Yeah.
pictures and videos to post up because there was
Amazing
obviously
pictures.
some stuff I couldn't post up while I was still in these countries. So
So when and where you go next?
Um, next will be so I left my bicycle at my cousin's house in outside Dubai, so I'll fly back to UAE and yeah, cycle the rest of the Middle East. So UAE, Oman, Saudi, I'll go through Iraq and then hopefully dip back into Iran before continuing into Turkey and then hopefully across Europe. So I'll finish off all the cycling next year.
And
That's
that
the
was the
plan.
original plan, wasn't it? New Zealand to Ireland.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that was so when I flew to New Zealand, yeah, I was meant to cycle home. So that was January 2020. So what we're March 2024. So a bit delayed, but we'll finish it. So then,
Amazing travels. Thank you so
yeah,
much.
thanks a million, Fergal. Take it easy. Sloan.
I'd ask you to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you'll be the first to know whenever a new episode is coming out. I'd also ask you to follow me on Travel Tales with Fergal on Instagram, and you'll get updates on what's coming next. And if you did enjoy the episode, I'd encourage you to rate and review the episode, as it helps other people to find this series. Take care and safe travels.